thank you everyone for coming. We got a really interesting talk today entitled A Crisis Within a Crisis, Migration Flows in Greece in the Turmoil of the Bailout Agreements 2010 to 2015. We're very fortunate to have with us Dimitris Christopoulos to discuss everything that's going on with the migration crisis in Greece.
And not everything.
This is again in the context of the Hillary term seminar series, which has focused on crises in the Balkans and in Greece. And so a little bit about our guest speaker today. Dimitris Christopoulos is an associate professor of comparative politics at the Department of Political Science and History at the Panteion University in Athens. He is also the vice president of the International Federation for Human Rights, and in the past has chaired the Hellenic League of Human Rights, and also was a candidate for the European Parliament with Syriza in the last European elections. He writes, he is interviewed frequently in international and Greek media, and also writes very frequently for major publications in Greece. And he specializes in the promotion of human rights awareness in Greece, and particularly in the context of the current financial crisis. As our discussant today, we have our A.G. Levendis Fellow here at CSOX, Kostis Karpozilos, who has a PhD in history from the University of Crete. And Kostis has also been a postdoctoral fellow at Columbia and Princeton, and has taught at the University of the Peloponnese and Sciences Po. And his research focuses on the Greek crisis, the European left, and the history of the left in Greece. And before we start, though, I have an announcement to make before I turn it over to our two speakers, is that tomorrow at 2:30 there will be an event chaired by our Calypso Nikolaidis, and with a very special guest, with Nikiforos Diamandouros, who was the ombudsman of the European Union. Former. Thank you, Calypso. And
Former Greek ombudsman.
Yes. And so everyone should attend this event. And the title of the event is "The State of Greek Democracy: A Conversation with Nikiforos Diamandouros." Should be an interesting event. With that, I'll turn it over to Dimitris Christopoulos.
Thank you very much. It is an honor. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So I do have how many?
Well, 35, 40.
Just tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, a crisis within the crisis. This is how I call the situation in my lovely country these days. And I use this picture. So, it's like a babushka doll in a doll. So the big doll is the Greek economy. The second doll is the refugee issue. The third doll is the memorandum. The fourth doll is social security reform. Fifth doll is agriculturists who protest in the streets. Sixth doll is, and you open, and there is still more dolls inside. So this is how things are. Very difficult. How you can deal with all these dolls, given the circumstances that the Greek state is in today. If only one doll was there, there would have been a great problem. Imagine with all these dolls. After all, you can say that given these circumstances, things are okay. Now, but I will not speak about all dolls. I will not speak about every different crisis my country is in, but I will speak about the refugee issue, which is in our days an extremely topical one, as you know, for Greece and for Europe. And let me start with an introductory conceptual remark here. It is not a refugee crisis. It is a reception crisis. It is not a refugee crisis. It's a reception crisis. A refugee crisis is a crisis of reception of refugees, a social cohesion crisis, or even a humanitarian crisis. Countries such as Lebanon, Jordan, and so on, or the Turkish territory of Gaziantep next to Syria, are facing a refugee crisis. The EU is not in a refugee crisis. 1.4, 2 million refugees in 500 million is invisible. It's not a crisis. So, the fact is not that Europe has many refugees. The fact is that Europe does not want refugees. We need to be honest here. This is what creates the reception crisis. The fact that we do not want the guys who are coming. Let's try to be simple here. And of course, the reception refugee crisis is a symptom of a broader European crisis, which of course needs further discussions and further intellectual developments, which we might share in the discussion which will follow. But for me, that is the first necessary starting point of any discussion on refugees today in Europe. The fact that we are talking about the crisis is a political choice. So why we're talking about the crisis? Because, let me use this nice words, it's the ideology. It's not facts. It's our ideas. It's the way we see reality. It's not reality. It is a perception of reality mediated by ideas. These explain why migration is a topical issue, is a topic, or refugees is a topic in societies without migration. In November 2015, I was in Poland, invited for a conference there. It was a week before the elections. I had a Polish friend next to me who was translating the political discussions going on during the campaign. And it came that 80% of the discussions had to do with migration. And then I asked my friend, how many migrants and refugees you have in Poland? And it was less than 100 refugees. This is not a crisis, dear friends. It's not a crisis. This is ideology. This is a moral panic created by ideas. Why there? I think that this is a serious discussion which must take place in Europe today. I think that the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, they got a very hard lesson and a very painful lesson of economic liberalism in the 90s. But the lesson of political liberalism was not there. So what today we call neoliberal policies, etc., was actually implemented in a rather painful way in these societies in the 90s. But the discussion about dignity, about rule of law, about these values which are the premises, the alphabet of political liberalism was more or less a pretext, or at least the lesson was not enough, obviously. So, In a Europe today, in the Central Europe, where austerity had been the rule over the last 25 years, and in countries which became the best students of austerity policies, it seems very hard today to implement policies which might be friendly to the idea of welcoming refugees. And that is why these countries, the best pupil, the most disciplined students of neoliberal economic policies, are not able to integrate the essential of political liberalism. Because we exhausted ourselves in the first lesson. That is why 1 million refugees are conceptualized as a crisis in societies who only see refugees on TVs. Of course, apart from these countries, you have other countries who do not only see refugees on their screens, and these are the countries of the final destination, such as Germany and Sweden. Not many, by the way, countries. And also the transit countries, such as Greece and Turkey. End of August, Angela Merkel said, as you very well know here, in her summer speech, do I say it correctly? It was a summer speech. How do you call the speech at the end of the summer? Wir schaffen das. So, I add the question mark. Can we do it? What are the results of the German policy of welcoming refugees? First, an intensification of the flows in September, October. Obviously, you'll see the numbers, and I'm going to share with you some numbers afterwards. You see a radical increase of the flows, which, according to estimations of refugees themselves and other people who have been working in the field, are related to the discourse of the German Chancellor. Second result of the German policy, a backslash of the Middle European countries, strong reaction with the right-wing German political audience, and an internal legitimacy crisis in Germany. And fourth, which is the most important here for us, for Greece, is the laxity in the transit countries, and particularly Greece and Turkey, that it will go on the way it had been going. So the Balkan route will always be there, because there is always the mother who will be hosting them. Arrivals. 2014, 2015. You see what's happening in July, but you see what's happening in September, in October, in November, and December. It is at the end of October that the official discourse changes after the summit in October 25th. More and more are coming. And this is 2016. These are people, this is the ethnic, the national background of the population. So you see 45% from Syria, 28% from Afghanistan, 18% from Iran, which makes a total of 91% of people from these countries, which brings us in a situation where we need to recognize that the profile of the flows is 90% refugees. 91% refugees today. I say that because, as you very well know, in a considerable part of the European countries today, there is a big discussion going on about a change in the composition of the flows. But what it seems here is that there is not a change, but there is an intensification of the refugee profile here, which could also be seen by the fact that you have 36% children and 21% women. This is a classic refugee flow. Migrants do not take their kids with them when they first arrive under such circumstances. So, this is what is happening today. We have, in 2015, let me go back, I do not have the total, a number of 900,000, which represents 2,000% increase if you compare it to the number of 40,000 we had in 2014. And these are arrivals in Greece. This will give you an idea of what's happening in the islands. So I understand that you know a little bit the Greek territory. So Lesbos has more than half, as you know, which represents an increase of nearly 600% compared to 2014. But we need to consider that Lesbos was always a point of arrival. You have Chios, which is also there, Samos, Leros, which is a particular case because people are not going directly to Leros. So the number you see here, 32,000 who are going to Leros, is the tiny minority of refugees arriving there. Most of them go to Agathonisi. And in front of Leros you have another island, Pharmakonisi, which is very well known because there are a lot of serious accidents there and so on. People who have died there 2 years ago and a few months also there. And you have Kos, which is known in our days for the not welcoming, let's say, position of the municipal authorities and of the society there vis-a-vis the population. So why we have all this? We have all this because we have an extended refugee pool. We do not have only Syrians, we do not have only Iraqians, we do not have Afghans, but we also have people who are already established in Turkey for the last 3 years. People who have spent their last 3 years in Turkey. In Turkey, as you know, you have 2.3 million refugees. Only 200,000, 50 or 60 live in refugee camps in decent conditions. The rest are outside. And these people actually are losing hope of returning. Second question, is there a responsibility of the Greek government regarding the rise of the flows, as it is actually meant or said today in some European countries, or meant and said by the Greek opposition? That's a crucial question, because the answer we give to this question will guide us to a very topical issue regarding Greece being the ideal scapegoat today about the crisis, about the refugee flows. As we were saying before, I started here, the Greek government did two things when it came to power regarding refugees. The first was an instruction to stop pushbacks in the sea. The second was an instruction to close the detention centers. These have been the only two changes that occurred ever since January 2015. Are these changes enough to justify this drastic increase in the flows? Of course not. If Greece would be following the restrictive policy of the previous government, we will have the same number of refugees. We will have 900,000 or 700,000. Let me say that we will have maybe 700,000 refugees, not 900,000 refugees. But instead of 400 deaths in the Aegean, we will have had more. So this is the dilemma. The dilemma is not between no refugees and a million. The dilemma, the real political dilemma here, is between a million or 700,000. Maybe, including the risk, of course, of creating new refugee routes via Bulgaria and so on. Let me go to the second part of my exposé. I will fulfill
Comply,
So, what are the country commitments within the relocation agreement? Registration centers. There was only one in Lesbos. I do not want to speak about the conditions there. I understood that you have already had a discussion last week on the matter, but if you want, of course, I can tell you how things have been there. Very bad. And there were the other four still missing until February. Now we have 4 hotspots. There is still one missing, but sooner or later there's going to be this hotspot down in Kos. You have the Eurotac fingerprint database, which was only 8% in September, and hopefully after, at the end of the year, the number was 78%. According to the agreement of the EU summit at the end of October 2015, Greece has assumed the responsibility of creating 20,000 accommodation places in public structures and 30,000 in private rent by the UNHCR for the people who will be relocated. So these are the commitments of the country. The question here, according to the report of the European Commission, which noted important shortcomings at the protection of the EU external borders, the real question underlying here is, how would you protect the sea border? I'm very happy, really, I'm open, sincerely open, to listen to an EU expert, a refugee expert, whatever expert, tell me that is how you protect the sea border. But I've heard nothing until today. I don't see how you can protect the sea border. Therefore, I don't understand what is meant by important shortcomings. I understand what is meant on the 3 first. I understand that the Greek government had not done the homework regarding the hotspots. I know very well that the homework was not done regarding the Eurotac fingerprint. I know very, very well that the homework was not done regarding the 50,000 accommodation places. But I do not know how to do the homework when it comes to protect the sea borders. Why this failure? How did Greece ended up as the perfect European scapegoat here? Let me share with you some thoughts of mine regarding the failure, the Greek failure here. The reasons. The first is a widespread perception of the Greek administration and society that the only moral obligation vis-à-vis refugees is to help them reach their final destination. And that's it. We are happy if we welcome them and then we say bye-bye. Let me be honest with that. We are the most generous traffic policemen. And that is what we believe it is our moral responsibility vis-à-vis refugees. And that is shared by everyone. Trust me, by the left and the right. By the Minister of Internal Affairs himself and the Mayor of X municipality. This is the main reason of the failure. The second reason, of course, has to do with the state of affairs within the Greek administration today. We are talking about a devastated public administration. But still, a devastated public administration such as the Greek one today would have been extremely much more efficient in the earthquake which happened 3 months ago in Lefkada. We will have done it there. We know how to do it, and we will have delivered. Which was not the case with the refugees, simply because the Greek government and the Greek society do not regard anything apart from the task of the generous traffic policeman as their duty. Third reason, last but not least, a consolidated feeling, and I guess that the Greeks here, or the people who know Greece, understand it very well, a consolidated feeling of defeat, of failure within the Greek society and the Greek government. There is nothing we can do. And that's something you hear today in Greece, not only about refugees. There is nothing we can do, trust me. This is how people feel. So if you feel that, you are immobile. You provide a legitimate argument for doing nothing. Because there is nothing you can do. You believe that there is nothing you can do. These three are the main reasons of the failure. Which brings me to the question. Yet, if Greece will have had fulfilled its commitments, will things be different, better for Greece? Probably yes. Probably yes. If Greece will have had fulfilled its commitments, will things be different for the EU regarding the reception crisis? No. I insist here. If the Greek authorities will have done their homework, will that make their life easier? Probably yes. Will that have changed things within the European Union? No. Unless we want other, more drastic ways of protecting the EU external borders, which are not said in public, apart from some extreme right-wing politicians in Croatia, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Greece. Crucial question. Why the whole agenda, the whole agreement about the relocation and the resettlement agreements does not work? Why this ambitious project is not able to deliver. I try to put it very simply. Relocation does not work since the flows prefer the Balkan route, which will lead them directly to Germany or Sweden. Nobody will stay in Greece to be relocated to Poland when the road is open to go via Macedonia, Serbia, to Germany. Relocation cannot function as long as the Balkan route is open. So, maybe now there is time, or time was to think about implementing the relocation agreement. Resettlement, of course, does not work because the EU cannot internally agree on sharing the burden proportionally. So today there is a reasonable hope, or at least grounds, for the relocation agreement to start delivering. Yet the long-term solution is resettlement. What now for Greece? What now for the country? The old is dead. The old, I mean the Balkan route. And the new is not yet there. In these transitional moments in history, Gramsci used to say that monsters sometimes are born when the new is not yet there. So, we are entering a new phase of the crisis in Greece today, which will not only be a reception crisis, as I said before, but it will be a refugee crisis, since it will accumulate the three characteristics of the refugee crisis, which is a reception crisis, a social cohesion crisis for the country, and a humanitarian crisis. What will be the result? The result is that this refugee crisis will spread all along the Greek territory, because people will try to open new routes to the north. I do have a map here. That's a very nice map which shows the creation of the state, but that is the map I use generally. So the reception crisis is here. When we're talking about a consolidated refugee crisis in Greece, we need to be talking about the West, because people will try to leave, as they have been doing, because until 2012, every Greek knows that there were a lot of people waiting in the Greek ports of Igoumenitsa and Patras on the road to the West. And also you will have new routes opening up to Albania. I say Albania because the illegal crossings between Greece and Albania are still open. There are people who have been doing that, people who are alive in Greece, Albanians that will easily help refugees to go to Albania. So it's not like the Greek-Macedonian border. The Greek-Macedonian border was traditionally a closed border. It was functioning only through the official boundary. Whereas the Greek-Albanian border was traditionally, over the last 25 years, a border which was full of illegal passings. So when we are talking about a different profile of the crisis, we also include a different geographical extension, let's say, of the crisis. So what can we do? What can the country do today? I think that there is the only solution that the Greek government has today, in the extremely difficult situation it is in, and given the fact that the Balkan route closed, is to first advocate the relocation agreement by assuming its own responsibility. Some people must and will stay in Greece. Only by undertaking this duty, the country might regain some points of its lost international credibility. You know, when the Greek governments are saying generally that the refugee issue is a European issue, what they mean, but they do not say, is that actually it is not a Greek issue. When Greeks are saying that this is a European issue, they mean that it's not their issue. So we need to give a different meaning to the term European issue. We need to include the Greek responsibility in the European issue. The relocation agreement concerns also Greece as a country, which is not only a transit. It is a country of destination for a considerable number of people, according to an honest burden sharing with other European states. If you don't do that, then you have no moral arguments vis-à-vis the European Union. And only by doing so, there is a chance for the resettlement to get started, because the Greek government actually, along with the United Nations, UNHCR, with all the international NGOs who are dealing with the refugee crisis, advocate the idea that only resettlement can function. People living from Syria or Turkey to their final destination. So, but the only way we can achieve that today in Greece is by stopping this wave-through approach of people coming. The term wave-through approach was a term used in the last conclusions of the EU summit, meaning the non-controlled flows. But when the EU summit mentioned the wave-through approach, what they really meant was the flows going from Greece to Macedonia. But these are not the only flows. There are some wave-through flows who come through real waves, the sea waves. The only solution is a safe passage from the land border. Greece was not able, during the months of the Balkan route, to open the land border. Why? Because once, should that have happened, it would have been considered by the rest of the European states as an act of war. Today, Greece has the Balkan route closed, so I think that the sovereign state has its official borders, which cannot be opened, nor can be closed. Borders are filters. So, what are the arguments in favor of a controlled, safe passage from Evros? Evros is for the ones who do not know, is the river at the Greek-Turkish border. Less deaths in the sea, a humanitarian argument which counts per se, better control of the identity of the newcomers from Evros, the only way to save what could be saved and simplify the EU common asylum system and maybe save the Schengen area, a proportional burden sharing within Greece, and of course a better stand for EU-Turkish negotiations. I'm not going to speak about Turkey. That's a big chapter alone. But Evros might mean that Turkey will also have to do its own homework regarding screening. Shall we do it? Can we do it? Schaffen das, θα τα καταφέρουμε. Let me share with you, to end my hope without optimism. And that is the title of the latest book of Terry Ingleton. Hope without optimism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitris. Kostis?
Well, I just have 2 or 3 notes. As you can imagine, it was impossible to foresee the actual content of this talk, as things have been changing so rapidly over the last 2 weeks. When we first discussed about this, we had different thing in mind. So first of all, I mean, that's something to consider, how historical time evolves, how, you know, the decision to close the Balkan route has transformed the discussion within Greece, but also possibly will transform the discussion within the EU. On the other hand, I'm a historian, so I'll have to make a historical question. It seems to be history by now, even though it was just a year ago or less than a year ago. And this has to do with your involvement in the summer negotiations and your involvement with the Greek government at that stage until July 2015. June 9. Was June, yeah, late June 2015, just before the referendum. And this seems so distant now in a certain way. And I was just wondering, during that period, was there any discussion about the refugee crisis, as you call it, or, you know, the reception crisis, or was the whole Greek EU debate centered on the financial question, and this was totally independent from any consideration that this would be a problem? Because it seems, in the chronology of events, it's a very striking coincidence. The end, or, you know, the end of the negotiations, the Syriza capitulation in July-August coincides with a new crisis, which is the refugee crisis, Merkel's announcement and so forth. So I was just wondering if you could, if you can see any.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So that is the first point. The second point again is a matter of politics.
Let me take the first one. I will be very brief.
All right. Yeah.
All right. You want to do it otherwise?
No, I mean your way.
There was no plan. There was no plan due to all different reasons that I tried to explain a little bit. The major concern back then at the beginning, in May, you see what was, in May we are 1,000% more than May last year. In discussions, we believe that we might face a number of 200,000. This is the number that everybody expects. UNHCR, Greek police, Greek port authorities, everybody is talking about 200,000. This is the number we have back then. 250, somebody said, and we said, oh, that's excessive. So the main concern then is what to do in the islands. The main concern is how to safeguard the touristic, the profile of the islands. The second concern, which is shared by the mayor of Athens, is to safeguard the social cohesion in the historical center of Athens. And the third concern that I can share with you is the fact that the Minister of Defense himself, who is now responsible about the migration management as such, followed a hands-off approach. So at the time, I can tell you, if I answer correctly, there was no idea.
Right. Which brings me to the second question. That has to be.
But that is not particularly Greek back then, but some part of it is particularly Greek.
It's a Greek story. Yeah, because my second question relates to the Greek army and its recent involvement in the handling of the crisis. And in Greece, there's always this sensitivity about the army and its involvement in actual politics. And this, I was wondering, as you described the Greek society, its reluctance to understand itself as a reception society, what is the conditions, what is the real situation in the Greek police, in the Greek army, and to an extent what we call the Greek, simplification, the Greek deep state? Because you mentioned the change of policy when it comes to setbacks, but this is just not an abstract notion. This has to do with the people working there, the port authority, the control authorities. Is there any way to see continuity of the policies? Is there any change over this past few months? And what is the reason that currently the army is involved in the handling of the crisis? What has changed after all in this 6 or 7 months?
So let me start from the end. what has changed is the fact that Greece has undertaken until the 18th of February the obligation to construct five hotspots, 2 relocation centers, and so on, and only the army is capable to do it. That is a fact. It might be sad. It might be annoying for some people in Greek society who do not wish the army to do who do not wish the army to be present in the Greek public sphere. But I think that the Greek army should have been mobilized already in May 2015. That's actually an idea that I've intensively have been advocating ever since. The army in Greece, as you know, has a considerable number of empty barracks all around the country. The army is able to undertake transfer of people, is able to feed the people, things that the Greek state is not able to do now. In a situation of a humanitarian crisis or of a disaster, the Greek army has been always doing the homework. I do not see why the Greek army should not have been doing the homework until now. What happened is something which is rather annoying. For months now, the Greek army was completely absent of the management, and out of the blue, when the Greek government understood that only the army can save the situation, according to a law that passed 10 days ago, the Greek army not only undertakes the logistics of the operation, but undertakes the management of the crisis, which in my eyes is extremely problematic from a political viewpoint and a state viewpoint. So regarding the first question, what has changed? I told you what changed. The Greek authorities were not doing pushbacks. They stopped. Of course, there are incidents of pushbacks during the summer, but these are pushbacks that are not the result of instructions. And the Greek authorities decided to close the detention centers of irregular migrants in the country. But that is a decision that lasted for a few months, because after November, the detention centers are open again for people who cannot be relocated. So, irregular migrants from Africa, and particularly from the Maghreb countries, are detained. Whereas before, everybody was detained. Children, women, pregnant, asylum seekers, and not only they were detained, but they were detained for a period of 12 months, then it went to 18 months, then it became indefinite, and that changed, and I'm happy about it.
No. So my last question, that possibly you've already answered in a way, is if at the end, I mean, I think you are a rare bird of, a committed person to the ideals of the left, and at the same time with a pragmatism that often the left is not able to demonstrate. But is there a progressive, I mean, at the end of the day, is there a rupture between political pragmatism and political ideas of the left? Can you see a leftist, what we would call a progressive response to this question, or is it just there's a convergence, and the only thing to be discussed is the relocation and numbers and the implementation of the relocation process in various countries?
This is, of course, extremely difficult for me to answer, honestly. I'm so much inside this operation over the last months that I do not have the necessary intellectual distance from things which will allow me to answer in the way you want me to answer. I'll try. The first thing here is to minimize the risk of people dying. That's how I see the story. And that is I don't see that as a left priority. I see that as a priority which has to do with humanity. Should you take the risk that people will die, then you do not have a problem because you're left or because you're right. You have a problem because you fail to correspond to the premises of the idea of human security and human dignity. And these are ideals which, in my eyes, should be shared by everybody. There is only one part of the political spectrum which denies these ideals. This is far right. So, for me, what is imperative today in Europe is to keep our eyes open on the fact that people could knock at your door. Because this is what it's all about today in Europe. As I said, it's not a refugee crisis, it's a reception crisis, which is the result of the fact that the Europeans do not want refugees. But we have came to an agreement in the 50s that the refugee is like a raped woman who knocks your door, and you open the door, you keep the woman in the house, and you don't shut the door by saying, "I'm sorry, I did not rape you." Because this is what Europe is saying today to them. I'm not responsible. The term refugee does not figure in the document of the 18th of February agreement of the European Council. We are only talking about migration now. This is not an accidental shift in the discourse. The European Council does not talk about refugees anymore. Why is that? Because the idea behind this is that once the refugee has left his country of origin, the country where he faced the threat of his extermination or her extermination, and he goes next door, he's safe. So, the guy who left Syria and is in Turkey, or the guy who left Turkey and is in Greece, is not a refugee anymore. This is the idea underlying this shift in the discourse of the European Union. So you're talking about progressive left, right. I don't follow. I just want to keep the basics. I just want to safeguard the premises of the customary imperative law, international law, which makes us, human, whatever. And then, when we will be facing the second stage of this long process, which is not the reception, but it's the integration of these people in your society, then there is an agenda which could be called a progressive one, a left or a right one. To what extent you see the conditions of these people becoming citizens of your country, how you see the fact that their kids should go to the same school as the kids of your friends, and so on. But at the very moment where you have someone who is facing the threat of his death, I don't see much which could divide the left and the right. I see much which could divide the extreme right, of course, and the rest.
All right. Sure.
So we'll open it up for questions and answers.